everyone. Let's start tonight's show with a distinction, because if I don't make it in the first minute, some of you are going to hear something I'm not saying. So let's settle the vocabulary early. 5 words are going to get thrown around tonight, and most people use them as though they all mean the same thing. They do not. A conservative Catholic is someone who loves and attends both the Novus Ordo and the Latin Mass, okay? And that person would be someone like me. A conservative Catholic. A traditional Catholic is someone who loves the older liturgy and is in full communion with Rome. The SSPX is a society of priests founded by Archbishop Lefebvre in 1970 that has never been in regular standing with Rome, though it does hold that the Pope is the Pope. A Sedevacantists goes further than that and says the chair of Peter is empty, that there is no valid Pope at all. And radical traditionalism is not a liturgy and is not an institution. It's a posture. It's what happens when any of the last 4 hardens into contempt. So loving the Latin Mass is not radicalization. Wanting reverence, wanting beauty, wanting your children catechized instead of entertained is not radicalization. None of that is. There are thousands of Catholics in this country who kneel at an altar rail every Sunday and then go home and live generous, ordinary lives. This episode is not about them, and I'm not going to let the comment section pretend that it is. What I want to look at tonight is nearer and a great deal stranger. It is the question of how devotion turns, how a family that begins by wanting more of God ends up somewhere that runs on fear, where one man's word is the last word and where asking a question out loud marks you. That does not happen in a day. Nobody wakes up and decides to be radicalized. It happens the way water finds a crack. Slowly, reasonably, one small yes at a time. And every single yes feels like faithfulness while you are giving it. My guest today there it is, Traddyland. My guest today lived it. Louis Massett grew up inside the Society of St. Pius X. He went to the SSPX Academy in St. Mary's, Kansas, the largest traditional community in the United States. He has written a memoir about it called Traddyland. It is long, it is honest, and it is not a hit piece. I want to be clear about that because I've read some of it so far. He is not settling scores. He's trying to understand what happened to his own family. Now, Lou has been on lots of podcasts by now. So when the two of us talked on the phone earlier this week, I asked him a different question. I asked him what nobody had asked him yet, what he was still wanting to say. He gave me 2 answers. The first is the nature of radicalization itself, not the shocking stories, the mechanism, what the early signs are, where the line sits, what a person can actually see from the outside, and why it seems to be nearly invisible from the inside. Now, the second answer surprised me, and it's the reason I wanted to do this episode. Lou has spent his career in classical education, teacher, coach, headmaster. He believes in it. He is not a man who walked away from tradition and burned it down behind him. He walked out of one version of it and then spent 20 years building a better one, which means he can tell us something almost nobody else can tell us. A school can teach Latin, Homer, and Aquinas and turn out a young woman who thinks for herself. The same book list in a different building turns out a young woman who obeys. Same books, opposite result. What is the difference? And how does a mother standing in the lobby on a school tour know which one she's looking at? One thing I want on record before we start, the SSPX rejects the description of itself as a cult. You should hear that from me, not find it in the comments. Now, before I bring Lou in, I'm not asking you to watch this as a spectator. Most of you know somebody who has gotten harder these last few years. Somebody whose faith used to make them warm and now makes them sharp and bitter. If that is your brother or your daughter or the parish you drive past on purpose now, this conversation is for you. Lou, welcome to Eternal Life Plan.
Thank you for having me, Christine. That was a great introduction. I was enthralled by what you said. I'm like, keep talking.
Did I get anything wrong?
No, you did a great job. I was impressed. I was like, wow, you really did your homework.
Before we dive into the questions, I would like to screen share and show the audience your website. If you'll bear with me for a second, everyone, because I really like your website.
Thank you.
And let's get right to it. Here it is, everyone. And I've got the link in the comment. And Dan, if you would run the ticker across the screen, everyone can see it. So this is Traddyland that Lou built. And I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what all the work that he has put into his story. And it is some story too. So, all right, Lou, here's my first question for you, okay? So before we get into the book, let me make sure I have your background right. You were principal at Tyburn and then headmaster at Veritas. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Okay, all righty. When you use the word radicalization, what do you mean and what don't you mean?
Radicalization is essentially, it is a active fundamentalism, right? Which is, I would give the analogy of like socialism versus communism, where socialism, if you understand it, is like it's the natural kind of passive way of trying to change the economic system of a country to a socialist idea, where the communist is much more active. We've got to fight, right? So I think in my, at least the way I see it and use it as radicalization, is there is a much more aggressive form of a kind of fundamentalist belief. So that answers your question. That's kind of how I see it.
And you found that in the SSPX?
I found that in strands of the SSPX. And I think it's, the way I describe it, Christine, is that there's a spectrum. Sometimes I think it's very easy for us to have a binary view of things, black and white, right? That is a fundamentalist view, black and white. And there's no room for nuance. And part of that problem is people don't have maybe the academic pedigree, or they don't have the background to really be able to make a decision. So sometimes they're they're just winging it, right? And it's easy to kind of say, well, this is what it is, or they might trust people that are telling them this is what it is. And sometimes, unfortunately, when we're trying to convince people of things, we use a lot of hyperbole, right? To kind of persuade people, so I hope that answers your question. That kind of.
Yeah, it does, because I think when most people think of the SSPX, they see it as a radicalized version of Catholics because of the trajectory they've been on for so long. And I think it's wrong thinking that every part of it is radicalized, or that every part of it is cult-like, because they'll say they're not a cult.
Right.
And when you were in it, and when you made that decision to leave, when you looked back at that, Lou, did you think it was cult-like, or it had aspects of the cult?
So it's funny that you asked that, because even when I was writing my book and talking to my friends that have gone through a similar experience, some of them have said, "Oh, it's a cult," right? And I'm like, well, if you look at the definition of cult, it actually isn't. Were there cultish elements in certain places? Absolutely. In St. Mary's, the time we were there, the headmaster was Father Angles. It was very cultish. Sans the secretive aspect of it, right? Where you say there's the secret. So the SSPX isn't really, there's nothing secret about the SSPX. This is what we do. But there are a lot of elements of the control. And it depends too, because there's, all over the country, or all over the world, there's different, parishes, or they have little kind of like missions, basically, and it depends on the degree of influence that they have. And I'll give you an example. I had one family member, they had a wedding, and the father of the bride asked the pastor, no, let me step back. The father of the bride is well-educated Catholic man with a master's degree. And he had the pastor pick out the music for the reception. And I was like, dude, why are you having him pick out the music? He goes, well, I just want to make sure. I'm like, make sure you know probably better than he does what music is good and what music is bad. So there's this sense sometimes like this, in the Catholic tradition, we call it clericalism, right? And that there is a lot of clericalism within the Society of St. Pius X. And that has that aspect of, the grand leader, right? Like, that you put too much emphasis sometimes on obedience to your pastor or the leaders in a way where you almost shut off reason, right? And that's not healthy, right? And that's, especially early on with the SSPX, you had a lot of young priests that had no pastoral training. They didn't have some older, wiser priest showing them the ropes. So, and they were coming in, they're coming in hot because they're like, we're going to save the world. So there's a lot of things, especially back in the early days, that were really, a hot mess.
Well, that's interesting. You talked about the music, because when I got married in the Catholic Church in 1974, I'm showing you how old I am. And, unfortunately, the marriage did not last, but my fiance at the time, when we were going through our marriage lessons, that at that time you were required to go through so much marriage instruction before you got married. All right. And the priest, Father Kavanaugh, who old Irish priest, I wanted music of John Lennon.
He's like, no, imagine for you.
He's like, oh, no. Yeah. I'll get the music. Yeah, he wasn't going for Let It Be. Yeah. So, anyhow, wiser than I was at that time. I was 19 years old. So, okay. So anyhow, sometimes they do know best.
That is true.
So where is the line between a devout traditional Catholic and a radicalized one? And give me, something a viewer could actually observe, Lou.
Yeah. So I would say it comes down to, I think it comes down to charity and humility. And what I mean by that is, from a philosophical principle, when two things aren't the same, one is greater than the other. So for me, I look at there's an objective reality to things, and then there's a subjective reality. Like, I like strawberry ice cream, and it's my favorite, but it doesn't mean it's your favorite, right? You might like Rocky Road. And, today in the church, a lot of people may just feel very comfortable with the simplicity of the Novus Ordo Mass, the vernacular, On Angels' Wings, whatever the music, where somebody else might be like, oh my gosh, it would be like taking somebody that's used to reading Shakespeare and saying, okay, now we're going to go read Harry Potter. It's like, or Dr. Seuss. It's like, I'm reading Shakespeare or Chaucer or, Dante. I'm not going to start reading Child's. And so there's a certain element, especially with the in the church, where you have kind of these very kind of interpretations of liturgy that I don't think conform to what the Council Fathers had. No, I don't say I think. I know the Council Fathers didn't have that in mind. So these are one of the problems in the church that we're still trying to iron out. But if you were to take, say, the Novus Ordo Mass as it, like the way that it ought to be said, and the Latin Mass the way it ought to be said, there are a number of ways you can look at that. Like in Africa or China, where the church is growing, you can see how those adaptations have made it more accessible and more relatable to those people. So they're having a much richer experience. Mm-hmm. And or someone like me,
because it's culturally,
yeah. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. But I think you can say, objectively speaking, there's some real poetry and there's some real beauty to the prose of the traditional Latin Mass, the prayers that really express sacrifice and whatnot. So there's some really wonderful things that I think that are edifying. And it's a funny thing, Christina, I always say this is really what it comes. When I talk about the Mass, I think of it in the sense of like a movie, right? And I'm going to give you a movie. You think of Jaws, right? First big summer blockbuster movie. Jaws.
Right. And I can hear the music in my head.
You can hear the music in your head. How does that music go? Dun, 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 dun. And it really kind of puts your whole senses and your whole person into that moment of you feeling the tension, right? Because that's what music does. Now, if you were to take that music out and put Mario Brothers, it would totally kill the movie. The movie would be horrible. You're like, I don't really care. I don't want to go to that movie.
The shark would be happy.
Nobody would come to it, right? And so, and there's a certain element of the expression of worship, right, that is ideally supposed to be transcendent, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like what I think the traditionalists will say is that, this is what it's supposed to be doing, where a lot of the churchmen today are looking at this horizontal, like, how can we get something that is going to get everybody involved? And it's like, okay, and I think there's a both and here, right, that we're trying to reach out to people, but ultimately it's like, how do we start to ascend the mountain into these heights of holiness? And that's, I think, in the future, what we're trying, I hope what the church can, get to, and get through this conflict that we have right now with that kind of dual sense of the vertical and the horizontal.
Since you have experienced both sides now, all right, and I know this isn't in my list of questions I sent to you, but I am curious about this because in my real life, I'm a sales coach and trainer, and I train on mindset. All right. Mm-hmm. And people get stuck in their beliefs. Mm-hmm. How did you manage to eliminate your beliefs that were so strong from the time that you were a child being brought up into the SSPX to break free and now create a newer, better belief for the way that you view Catholicism now? How did that take place?
It's a great question. I would actually kind of alter the language. I didn't create anything, right? And what it comes down to is that truth, this is what it is. This is the crisis of our age, is what is truth. Traditionally speaking, or classically, we have understood that truth is this. It's defined as an idea or statement that conforms to reality. So if I speak the truth or if I believe the truth, it is saying that my mind, what's in my mind, conforms to reality, right?
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and today the problem is people say, "Oh no, truth is, is what I want it to be. I'm, mm-hmm. I'm a 5'2" Asian woman, right? Like, no, I'm 6'4" and I'm a Caucasian male. That's just the reality, right? So, that's kind of like this idea of relativism is kind of like one of the underlying themes that we're kind of dealing with today that John Paul II, Pope Benedict really tried to, tackle. So for me, it was, I'm Irish, right? And I'm German, so I'm very stubborn. And it was just the pain of things that helped me to realize, like, I just saw things that were painful and I experienced things that were painful, which I read about in the book, that forced me to the principle of law of non-contradiction, right? This can't be Catholic, right? This can't be Catholic, right? So something has to happen. It was a dreadful experience, right? For me, I had a dark night of the soul in a sense of almost on the verge of despair. Where's the church? Because at the time when these things were going on, I didn't think there was salvation outside the Society of St. Pius X. I thought the Society of St. Pius X was the remnant.
Okay.
But then I experienced what I experienced there, which I read about, and there were some terrible things that the devil tempted me to despair of salvation and goodness and the truth itself. And it was actually, I started going to the indult Mass in Syracuse, New York, and I saw these really good priests and other Catholics that were going there, going to the Latin Mass, that had never really been involved with the SSPX, that were beautifully, faithful Catholics, priests that were very faithful, that weren't doing clown masses. They weren't saying Muslims and Judaism and we're all equal and it's all the same thing and it doesn't matter what. They weren't saying that, right? They were saying Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Mm-hmm. And it was from there that I, had the grace to be exposed to the Great Books program, classical education. And that was really kind of the big thing that helped me to understand. And Christendom College. I went to Christendom College, and at Christendom College, I just encountered so many wonderful, holy people that had never been to the SSPX, never been to the Latin Mass. And they were extraordinary, and I thought, and they were extraordinary in their charity and their joy, right? And I was used to kind of like this glum, like, dun, 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 sort of thing. It's like, it's like, we're just in this valley of tears, And it was like, wait, we could be joyful? That's me. I love the joy aspect of being a Catholic, and that's how we all should be.
I agree. And the one thing about beliefs, Lou, is, and audience, hold on when I say this. Sometimes there's the truth. There's only one truth. That's it. All right. Sometimes your beliefs get in the way so much, you'd be better off not to have beliefs and just focus on the truth. Because if you hang on to beliefs that are not the right beliefs, it prevents you from being open-minded, kind of like you wrote in that article of Plato's Cave. Would you explain that for the audience that may not know that reference of that allegory that Plato wrote about in the Republic?
It's like the bedrock of education, right? Of
yeah.
Western civilization. Is Plato describes this cave where people are chained to this place, right? And behind them, and they can't see behind them, but behind them, there's like a fire, and there's people that are having these little things that are making shadows. And so the people see the shadows, and that's all they can see are the shadows. And they believe the shadows are the reality. Mm-hmm. And one of these prisoners in the cave escapes and starts to ascend out of the cave, and for the first time in his life experiences the sun. And at first the sun is painful and it hurts, and he almost wants to, shirk away from it, but eventually goes out and realizes the reality, the fullness of reality. And it, totally blows his mind. This is so much better than what I thought. And he comes back down to try to free his other the other captives, and he frees them. And then they don't want to believe what he said or what is going on, so they kill him. So in some ways, it's it's kind of like it foreshadows Christ. In a sense, it's like, people don't really, the truth is very hard, and I would say if I hadn't experienced the things I experienced and gone through the turmoils that I had gone through, I wouldn't be here today with you, talking to you in this way. So it was, God has led me. And my mom used to say this, I write this in the book, is God writes straight with crooked lines, and And the truth is difficult, and it requires humility, right? It requires, that idea, that understanding that we don't know, and it's okay not to know, because you can
Right.
still be a full human being that loves the people in your life without having all the answers, right?
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's what Christ, about being like little children, right? Is that sense of, this is what I have come to I'm working to realizing that, not just in my head, but in my actions.
Well, little children are just happy all the time. They're just full of joy and playful, and everything they see is a new adventure and it's a new wonder. And, I have a little 3-year-old grandson, and, the first time he sees a grasshopper. Yeah. Now, my son, the first time he saw a grasshopper, he grabbed it and put it in his mouth.
That's funny.
But, and I always think back at that the things that my son did as a child, my grandson now, that's what, in my mind, that is what Jesus meant about being little children, and just being so full of joy and love. Everyone, I want you to go on to Traddyland and read the article that Lou wrote about Plato's Cave. I forget the title of it. Do you know off the top of your head, Lou?
I don't remember actually what the title was. I've written a bunch of them since
I know you have. I went through and started reading his articles are so good, everyone. You've got to go to his website and read his articles, sign up for his newsletter, because his writing, you write really well. I mean, you're captivating, Lou.
Thank you. Well, being number 7 of 10, you got to try to find your way to get attention. And, I tried to master it at an early age.
Okay. Now, there is one thing I want to touch on, and that's the FBI. So your book jacket mentions a 2023 FBI investigation into the SSPX. Now, my understanding is that what actually happened, correct me if I'm wrong, was a Richmond field office memo about extremists taking an interest in radical traditionalist Catholic ideology, and that it was withdrawn and ended up in congressional hearings. Do I have that right, or does the difference?
That's pretty much it. Yep.
Okay. Why did that happen?
So there was, so there's two things. There was 2 problems. One was that the FBI, I think, got ahead of its skis, and they started to actually tail a pastor. Now, it's very important that it's all SSPX, right? They were all SSPX people, right? And
is this the one we saw in the news everywhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that was what it is.
Okay.
And so, there was an informant in the FBI that kind of framed this as, they're trying to target, Catholics. They're targeting Catholics. And that was not accurate, right? They were targeting radicals. And again, they probably did some things that were probably over their skis, but the reality was that there were multiple people. And it wasn't just Richmond. There was somebody in LA, I think, and in Portland, and I think in Wisconsin, that had these real, extremist views. And that's why I go about the radical. It's not just, hey, you know what? I really believe, Latin Mass and Archbishop of It was, the government's coming to get us, and it's a conspiracy, and we've got to, fight, and we got to, one guy in Richmond had made napalm with this like jelly that stuck to skin that would burn. I mean, it was really dangerous stuff.
Oh,
he was not just, I have 50 rosaries in my pocket,
Yeah.
It was something way worse than that, So the FBI was right to be concerned, but it was politicized. It was politicized by the
sure
right.
Was. Mm-hmm.
And I write about it in the book. There were certain things that the government does sometimes to target people on the left and the right. Obviously wrong. And so I'm not like trying to say that, the Biden administration didn't make mistakes or didn't have an axe to grind. But in this case, the FBI wasn't completely out to lunch. And it begins, and it kind of sets the stage for why I was saying this in the beginning of the book, because of what happened 30 years ago in St. Mary's.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Well, what led you down the classical education road?
Oh, that's a great question. So it was, well, it actually had to do with St. Mary's. I had the problem in St. Mary's and I left very disgruntled, very alienated, very concerned. And my future brother-in-law had introduced me to one of the priests that was a professor at the SSPX seminary, Thomas Aquinas Seminary in Winona. And so that priest had come to our house, and he was talking to me, and he was very, very charitable priest. His name was Father Carlos Rudigoidi, and he said, well, you should come to the seminary because I think you might have a vocation. You should, So, my father talked me into taking him up on that, and I got involved with him, and he was very much about classical education. And shortly after that, he and a few others were expelled from the SSPX because they were writing this document for this new order called the Society of St. John, which would be in collaboration with the SSPX, but the SSPX did not want anything to do with it. So they broke out. They were incarnated in the Scranton diocese under Bishop Timlin. They were going to build a city on the hill, and they started the Justin Martyr House of Studies, and they had this classical education. And I was in college at the time, and Father Rudigoidi was trying to recruit people there, and I went there, and that's where I was exposed to the classical education piece. Now, and I will say this to you in the audience, is my book initially was like a 1,200 page behemoth, and I just couldn't publish that. And as you can say it's a long book already, right? But so I cut it in half, and so there's going to be a part 2 to Traddyland that will deal with that, that was all in the news too, with the sex abuse stuff that happened there in the Society of St. John. But the silver lining was there I had experienced the Great Books program, and it really was a great grace for me.
Explain to the audience, Lou, what classical education is, because some of the newer audience or the younger audience may not know what that is.
So, the classical,
it used to be the thing in Catholic schools, but it kind of went away.
So basically what it is today is it's a focus on primary sources. So instead of, they don't have textbooks. They do a Socratic method where they will read a passage, and they'll sit around a table. Ideally they're small, and they'll start to have a conversation, and the teacher is more like a tutor, and they ask kids questions about what they've read, and they start to have these conversations about what they're reading. There's a heavy emphasis on Latin, studying Latin, and virtue. A big element is helping kids understand the life of virtue. So it's a beautiful methodology. I believe that it is going to save America. It will save the world. And you see it's really taking off. I can't speak highly enough of it. It is night and day as far as winning hearts and minds, to having kids recognize that education is not about hoop jumping. It's about their transformation, right? And it's great because the big thing today is math and science is the big thing everybody talks about. And the founder of Tyburn, his name was Father Albert Shamon. Father Albert Shamon was picked as the vicar of education by Fulton Sheen in the Rochester diocese, and he was like a mini Fulton Sheen. And he used to have a radio show, and he had a really distinct voice, and he talked like this, and he would say, "What good is it to know how the heavens go if you don't know how to go to heaven?" And so that's kind of like classical education. Or another way I kind of sell parents on it. I was like, I said, knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing that you don't put it in a fruit salad. And so, classical education is trying to seek wisdom. Like, what are we really here for? That's the purpose of educere, to lead people out of the double darkness of sin and ignorance that we're all born into.
I like that. I'm going to use that one. So a mother that's watching this and something in her stomach is turning about her own parish, or maybe her own school, maybe, public school. What are the first 3 things she should look at when considering a Catholic school for her child or her children, or a classical school, or is that obvious?
Well, I think
Is
there's
a
a
classical school obvious, I guess?
well, I think there's a number of factors. I mean, there's real challenges today, that parents have. If you're going to be a faithful Catholic, you're typically going to have a large family. And that means that mom's going to stay at home, so you have one income. So there's going to be financial struggles, right? These are realities that I'm fully aware of, and I think that everybody is aware of. It's not easy, right? So,
No.
and then to be able to have a school, you need to be able to pay teachers a living wage, right? And if you don't do that, then you got all these kids that are 22 or 23 that are just out of college, and they don't really know how to teach. So there's these challenges that we're dealing with right now, post Vatican II, because we had that mass exodus of priests and brothers and sisters out of the religious, the religious vocation, and they were, for lack of more graceful term, they were cheap labor.
Right.
But that was reality. That was the beauty of their sacrifice, that they were critical for the formation of young souls, and so we don't have that today.
Well,
So to
back
answer,
in the day, people were farmers,
Mhm.
and they lived on the farmland, and they had large families to help them manage the farm too. That was another thing. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I do believe that. So to your question, to make sure I understand you, you're asking what should a parent do when they have those three options? Are you saying homeschool?
What should they be looking for when they're putting their children in either a Catholic education? Because, here in my area, not all Catholic schools are the same.
No, I know, and sometimes it's if the school is not an Orthodox Catholic school, you're paying to send them to a hoity-toity public school.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And
That's
I
what I
hate to
found.
say that, but that's and that's a kind of a danger now. If the parents are well catechized, that's okay, and we have to be like the world. We can't be hidden, but we're talking about children that are impressionable. It depends on the child too. So I think that they have to. It's a case by case with a family. Like, what are the parents' attributes? What are the kids' attributes? Ideally, I would say that if you can't find a classical school, if you can't afford a classical school, that hopefully you could like find a co-op or something. Or there's something. It's difficult. There's no easy answer, I guess, is what I'm saying to Christine. I know it's not easy today.
Yeah, it's not.
I don't. One of the things that I had hoped to do, and I still hope to do down the road, is to start a foundation, because I do fundraising now for Students for Life. But down the road, I got into the fundraising space because I wanted to create a business where I could go around and help classical schools, teach them all how to do fundraising, and help establish a development office, and how does that work, so they know how to recruit students, how to do certain things, because I think a lot of them are mom and pops. They just don't know what they're doing a lot of times, and they will say that we don't know what we don't know. But you have the Chesterton Academy sort of thing. That's a really great thing that's happening across the country. I think they do really great work, and I just pray for families. It's hard. It's very hard today, and just acknowledge that.
One of the high schools here in my area, Catholic high schools, I mean, it's $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's crazy.
It's not quite college level, but that's expensive for a family, especially when you have more than one child going. And of course, they give you these graduated rates, but still, you can't afford $75,000 a year for 3 or 4 children. It's tough. Okay, I want to pivot back to your family. Where is your family in all of this, Lou?
So, like my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters.
Uh-huh.
So that is one of the reasons why I ultimately wrote Traddyland, because of what has happened recently with my family. Now, as you know, everybody knows, July 1st, you have the consecrations, and the majority of my family is SSPX, or they've even, to some degree, sedevacantist. Right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Even with the SSPX, there was kind of a big conflict, when Pope Benedict was trying so hard to create an environment where they could feel safe and come back in full communion. And the hardliners in the SSPX, Bishop Williamson, who eventually got kicked out, left with,
because he was a Holocaust denier.
He was something else. And a good number of priests that had left with him. So the SSPX had multiple schisms within their group from the beginning. I mean, multiple schisms. I think almost half of the priests that have been ordained in the SSPX have left.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So schism begets schism, right? And it's this, and it's kind of like the Protestant Reformation, right? It's like, we're going to do Christianity better than you. It's like, well, we're going to do traditionalism better than you guys. It's like, we're more traditional. I had a priest one time, my father one time when I was the principal at Tyburn Academy, one time, my high school religion teacher, wonderful priest in a lot of ways, but he had joined this resistance of the SSPX. And my father came to Tyburn to bring him, because I had just started working there and teaching there. And I was in the last period of the day, I was teaching moral theology. And he came after class. He came in right at the end of class, and I introduced them. And I was surprised because I didn't anticipate them to be there. But he said to me, "Lou, we have to stick to the one true traditional Catholic faith." And I was thinking to myself, how many modifiers there, or it was like breaking it down, right? It's like the idea of one true, it's like, okay, it's like, because who's really true and who really, and it's interesting. And he's a wonderful priest, but in many ways, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of wonderful people that are just kind of in that kind of the blinders, and those blinders are created by half truths, right? And that's the problem with the SSPX. I tell people, and it's like, you get past the beauty of all the good things that they do. They do beautiful masses. They have beautiful Gregorian chant. There's great piety. Those are all good things that we should all aspire to. They do those things very well, but I've said this to people too. Mormons dress modestly.
Yeah.
Mormons have families, right? Mormons check all the boxes politically, right, on the conservative things. Does that make Mormonism right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we've seen where that's gone with, oh gosh, I can never remember the guy's name, Jeffers, or the one that had the very fundamental and ended up going to prison because he was marrying 14-year-olds and Jeffers. I can't remember that guy's name. I always forget it. But let me ask you this, okay? Because I hear from a lot of trad wives, as I shared with you over the phone, some of those stories, and I'm not going to repeat them here, but there does seem to be, correct me if I'm wrong, because my area may be different, Lou, than most Novus Ordo parishes. But it seems to me through reading their letters, there's a very, very deep rooted sense of community in the SSP chapels. So their communities, which makes them very hard to leave because, like you, they're leaving their families, their good friends, their kids' friends. They're leaving all of that behind. And as some have shared with me that, when you leave, those that are left are to be shunned. And it just reminds me so much of Scientology. And I don't think, and now I could be wrong, but it doesn't seem like the Novus Ordo parishes have those deep-rooted communities like the SSPX communities have. Am I right or wrong there? Or somewhere in between?
You're 100% right. One of the greatest heartbreaks in my life, when I went, so you're absolutely right. That absolutely does happen. And, I could speak about the practical aspects of why that is, or I could give you an example of why that is, or what it looks like, because I experienced it and it was very painful. If you don't toe the line, And even if you don't want to leave, like I didn't want to leave, I just was like, hey, this is not this, what this priest is doing is really bad. Right. And it needs to be addressed. And it's like, oh, let's kind of excommunicate him, expel him, drive him out. And that's what happened to me. Even though I give you your audience a quick brief thing is that this, what happened in St. Mary's when I was there was right around the time of Waco, Texas. And there were,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so there were some crazy things that were going on in St. Mary's, and there was a schism in the town where a large number of parishioners had left and joined a priest that had left the SSPX because of some of the craziness that he got involved in. And I won't go into it. It's in the book. I think it's very compelling stuff. Read the book. Everybody that's actually reached out to me about the book, they said, Lou, actually had one priest, he said to me, he said, I bought your book and I saw how many pages it was. And he said, who does this guy think he is? And then he said, I started reading it and I couldn't put it down.
It's very good, everyone. You got to get it.
Thanks. Yeah. So it was compelling. But, and what I had gone through was so excruciatingly painful that at one point, I realized I had to turn to God, and I was going to one of my friends' parents' house to pray the rosary every night because I lived in an apartment with another friend that had graduated from St. Mary's Academy with me. And we were going there, and I didn't drink, I wasn't carousing, I didn't do drugs. I was a straight-laced kid through and through. And one day after Mass, he said to me, Lou, you can't come over anymore. And I was like, why? And he was like, because Father McDonald called and said that having you at our house is a scandal.
Oh.
And that
had to have been hard for that guy to tell you that.
Oh yeah, he was torn up. And I went and spoke to his father about it. I went to his office and I pled with him for an hour. He's like, well, the priest said to us, Lou, this is what we got to do, and we have to obey our priest. He's like, he's just trying to save souls. I'm like, what about my soul? I said, what about my soul? I said, because what happened was that there was, this Waco, Texas thing happening, and a number of the parishioners had called the Topeka television news, and they did a special about the cult in St. Mary's, and a number of these adults said, Lou, you need to tell your story. And I was impressionable, and I was kind of reluctant, but I felt like, well, this is the right thing to do because they were making death threats against this priest, Father Rizzo. They shot at his house. They called him. They said, you're a dead priest if you come here. They were taking the lug nuts off of other parishioners that left their vehicles. One of my classmates, the wheel of their minivan literally came off as they were driving down Main Street. I mean, it was crazy.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy. So the book, there is crazy stuff in this book that people, it's like, that's why, I have it here. Why I have this part. It's hard to believe, right? There's some things in there that are just like, what? And it's all documented. So it's not, it's not me exaggerating or me trying to, I'm not trying to disparage the SSPX or traditionalists, but it's this point of crazy. What will you do? What extent will you go to save your kids from eternal damnation?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this idea, and this is what Pope Francis talked about, is this Pelagianism. It's like, we're going to save ourselves. It's like, well, are we going to save ourselves? Or is the Lord going to save us? And if it's the Lord, we have to look at what he told us to do and how to live. Right. Because that's what the devil tries to do. And that's what you see in my story.
Yeah. So, and the thing I've never ever been an SSPX. Never. I mean, I know people that have left the SSPX. Their stories are similar to yours, Lou, that it became, well, some of them won't even speak out about it because they don't want to put their friends and family in a difficult situation. So it takes a lot of courage on your part. I don't know why my screen keeps collapsing. It takes a lot of,
It's the devil.
Oh, no. If you listen to Father Ripperger, everything's the demon. So
get some holy water.
I got some right back there. But anyhow, sometimes it's just the screen collapsing, But it's just as difficult for those that are in the SSPX to see their friends and family leave as it is for the friends and family that are leaving. There's pain and suffering on both sides. And I have no compassion for the men who are taking away the free will of their wives in the SSPX. I have no compassion for them. God forgive me, but I don't. I do have a lot of compassion for the women who are forced to stay. And I have a lot of compassion for those right now who know, I don't know what their priests are spinning all of this to be. But they have a brain, they have a conscience, they can read, and they can understand. And I am sure they're in their dark night of the soul right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There is no question in my mind, from my experience, there's a deep-seated misogyny in the SSPX. Now, and I'm not somebody who's like some sort of like, bra-burning feminist type of like, woohoo, type of person. I believe, there's the distinct natures of men and women that are complementary, what I'm saying? And I think that, what we were taught at Christendom, I thought was so beautiful is that, it's a constitutional rule, right? There's this togetherness where ultimately somebody has to make a decision, right? And, typically it's the husband that does that, but sometimes it's the wife who has the clear, the clear thinking and the better judgment, and it's just, and so, but this idea that women, that they have, not all of them, but a lot of them do, where it's almost like, okay, here's the kids, and just right above is the wife, and then there's the husband, right? And it's like, and it's just it's a distortion, right? And it's not.
Oh, Mike Lewis is on. Maybe Lou can talk a little bit more about how the SSPX creates fear about leaving and the struggle that people have after they leave, going to the Novus Ordo for the first time after leaving, etc. Thank you, Mike Lewis, for watching and your comment.
Hey, Mike. Mike's a friend.
Well, he's the one that told me to reach out to you.
That's right.
And one of my viewers on Tuesday night said, you need to watch Larry... I'm sorry.
Larry Chap.
Yeah. Interview with Louis Massett. And I said, that's who I'm having on Thursday night. So go ahead. Answer Mike's question.
I'll tell you another story because I'm a storyteller. In the book, one of my friends who was an incredibly extraordinary, talented guy, he went on to West Point after St. Mary's, very successful guy, was an incredible athlete. And our headmaster, Father Angles, didn't like him, and he wasn't a big fan of Father Angles, and he was concerned about the way that Father Angles was expelling people that questioned how he did things. So Mike and his family decided at Christmas time of our junior year not to come back. And we were all disappointed, but he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't break any rules. He was squeaky clean. And his girlfriend told us like a month later that he was coming back to pick up some of his things. And Father Angles told us, if you see him on campus, you kick him off campus. Now, we didn't want to do that, but we had this attitude towards him that was like, oh, Mike, yeah. And I vividly remember him coming down from the upper school where the cafeteria was, and coming down the stairs, we saw him, and he's like waving at us. You can see he was all excited. He came up and it's like, hey guys, and we could barely even make eye contact with him. To this day, I feel terrible about it. I feel so much regret about it, but didn't make eye contact with him, barely talked to him, and he could tell clearly that something was askew, right? Because we were just couldn't even be bothered to talk to him. And he wrote me a letter afterwards saying that he'd never been more disappointed with somebody, and he thought I was his best friend. And anyways, we've reconciled now. We're good friends again. But I had to go through a terrible, it actually caused an ulcer, after that. 'Cause I was so conflicted over this. It's not who I am. I'm not like that to be a shunning kind of a person. But So,
But you felt like you had to obey.
oh yeah, and Mike was, I mean, he went through a terrible, terrible, he was what he went through, the pain, this emotional, psychological pain after that. It's like, where do I go? Like, you think like there is no salvation outside the society. And so it's like, it's either you stay in this little boat or you're
going to hell.
Yeah. Yeah. So, these are the things a lot of people go through and they believe. And that's what it comes down to, is that, the society is selling a bill of goods that are not true, that there's no holiness inside holy. Listen to what Bishop Goldaddy said at the Vespers sermon at the consecrations on July 1st. He said, the church, the modernist church is like a desert. Everything it touches, it destroys. I've told everybody in my family that will listen that are SSPX, I'm like, that is so evil. It's so untrue. You have friends that are in the mainstream church. Look at how devout they are and holy are. It's not true. They're misdiagnosing the problem in the church, and all of the faithful just run along with it. And they're so conditioned. And the thing is this, and this is what really alarms me, Christine, is this happened in 1988 and it's going to happen again. Is in 1988, after they did the illicit consecrations, it seemed like their programming for their sermons went from, let's talk about the Gospels, to like, let's talk about 20% of the Gospels and 80% of what's wrong with the modernist church, right? And it was like, we got to keep people believing that this is a state of emergency because their whole canonical, in their minds, their whole canonical status is predicated upon people believing that this is a state of emergency, right? And so it's this thing, and it kind of creates this is where the radicalization comes into society, right? And you start looking at like all these other things, and it's all these like Candace Owens kind of like ideas of taking things and saying, oh, and if you do this and you do that and you connect the dots, and it's the Jews.
Asking questions.
Yeah, just asking. Exactly. And it's like, well, you're not asking very good questions, or you're making a lot of assumptions that in principle is contrary to what our Lord taught us to do.
Right. Well, even Jesus didn't force people to believe. He didn't force people to listen to him. He didn't sensationalize anything. He stood on a mount, and he just was a pastoral rabbi teaching to anyone that wanted to listen to him. He didn't force people to listen to him. And I often think, if Jesus came back today, and, would he be doing live streams and podcasts, or would he be out in the streets on the corner, ministering to the homeless and the addicted people that were just cast out of society? Where would he really be in this world that we've made, based on the next click and view? How would that all transpire? And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but
No, you're right. I mean, what is it? What would Jesus look like today? What do his actions look like? And I think that we see that in the church. And I think that, these are the things that I think are the deep conversations that we need to have, because there's like this petty superficiality where we start talking about things. And I think what happens is, and I would just actually, had a conversation I had an invitation to Mike Lewis, who I talked to, and Mike Hitchborn. There was some dispute over, I think Christy Niles had said something. And I'm like, and I've invited both of them, like, let's get together and talk about these differences. Because I know Mike Lewis is a devout Catholic that cares about things, and I know there's people that think maybe he's a hard charger, maybe he's a little bit tough on people sometimes. But the same thing can be said about a Mike Hitchborn or whatever. It's like, it's like we're talking past each other.
Well, and what it is, Lou, is people get so dug in being right.
You're right. Yeah.
That they can't open their minds to have an actual conversation with the other person at the opposite view. They call it a debate. How about we just call it a conversation?
Right. Well, one of the things, and I gotta give a shout out to Mike, because I talked about this. Like, let's try to find a way that we can start conversations, because I think for the good of the church with this crisis with the schism, is we need to be able to lower the temperature.
Yeah, I agree totally.
And recognize that, I have been wrong about a lot of things, and I will continue to be wrong about things, right? And all of us are. But if we can simply look at each other and say, I want your happiness, and this is the core principle. I want your happiness, and your highest happiness is to be with our Lord Jesus Christ in heaven one day, right? That is the greatest good that we can, realize. But then in the meantime, I said, well, gosh, I got to make sure that you have a roof over your head. I got to make sure that, at least I got to try to help people that don't have that, or they don't have food, or they don't have. These are all things that, it's not just about saying, I'm going to give you the truth from on high. Well, I don't care if you're starving, but let me give you my opinion, right? It's
right.
Like, well, I can eat your opinion. I'm starving right now, buddy. And this, so it's the both and, right? There's this both and of things I think that we have with the church, with people that are heavily focused on the left, which is the social justice, and on the right, it's all about doctrine and dogma, right? And it's like, okay, well, there's both and. We have to care about both of them, and I think that's kind of what the church has to come to.
Well, and Mike Lewis and myself even are often labeled as modernist. We are not modernist, whatever that means. We're not liberal, whatever that means. Liberal means something totally different than it did 50 years ago. So, and I think that finger pointing has happened way too often inside the Catholic Church, labeling. I've got this hair, Lou. Sometimes I think it's my guardian angel trying to get my attention, and he's tickling me with his feathers, his wing feathers. Anyhow, and that's why I went through those definitions in the beginning, because I think way too often we lump everything into one thing, and it's not. But the truth is, and Pedro Gabriel says this all the time, we're not modernist, traditionalists, we're Catholics.
Yeah. I had a friend at Christendom one time. He was like, well, I'm a traditional Catholic. And I said, I used to call myself a traditional Catholic, but I don't anymore. I'm Catholic, because the moment I start saying I'm a traditional Catholic, I'm starting to put a wedge between me and other people. Or I might say with non-Catholics, I just say I'm a Christian. Right. And say that I try to follow Christ the best of my ability. And I believe that, the fullness of what Christ taught is realized in the Roman Catholic Church. Right. And, that is my belief. And I'd love to talk about it. But, I've seen people that aren't Catholic, that are Baptist, whatever. I used to work at a military school in Southern Virginia. There's some beautiful people that really love the Lord, and they were good in so many ways, And it's like, when I was younger, I would be like, well, they're going to go to hell. Right.
Right.
It's too bad they're going to hell, and it's like, well, I just think that we have to change the way. And I think this is the thing about, John Paul II or Pope Benedict or Pope Francis. It's like saying, how do we change up the way that we talk to people, right? And having such a hard charging, where did that get us? The 100-Year War, World War I, World War II. There's a certain point where I said to my traditional Catholic friends, I'm like, you got to realize that Europe was pretty tired and was kind of doing a lot of introspection by the end of World War II, of and there was a lot of doubt, there was a lot of discouragement, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But it wasn't like a lot of people say, if we just got back to the 50s where everything was perfect in the church, it would be great. It's like, it wasn't perfect in the church.
No, it wasn't.
And that's the thing. A lot of people believe that it was like, oh, this was, maybe in America things were better at the time, but there was major problems in the church, right? And Vatican II was called, to address a lot of those problems. And, I think that there are a lot of great things that came out of it. Obviously, there's been some serious, issues with the implementation at times. We can see some challenges, but the church is holy.
I think that there's this narrative that has been pushed about Vatican II that it came to radically transform the church. And that's not why it came about. but people believe, because they've heard it so many times in certain Catholic circles, that they believe that that is what Vatican II was all about. But it was addressing some of the grievances that was going on in the church as well. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but
fun rabbit hole though.
Oh, it's a big one.
And down that rabbit hole is fun.
We might find Alice in Wonderland down there.
The Mad Hatter.
Yeah. By the way, and I was just thrilled to see this because I'm a huge Johnny Depp fan. He is Ebenezer Scrooge coming out this Thanksgiving, everyone.
Oh, I saw that today too, actually.
Yeah. So, all right. You've been with us an hour and 5 minutes. If you can stay on for a little bit longer, we're going to cut the break. Then I'm going to ask you to say a prayer, and then we'll take some of the comments and questions. Would you mind doing that?
Happy
Lou?
to.
Okay.
Happy.
All right, everyone. Stay with us during the break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, Lou, if you could lead us in prayer, I'd appreciate it.
I'm going to actually do a prayer that we used to say at the end of our rosary. My father always added this to our rosary. We used to belong to St. Francis Parish in Bridgeport. And they actually, my parents almost named me Francis, but they named me after St. Louis de Montfort because my dad had a particular devotion to the rosary, which I talk about in the book and the importance of the rosary. But I would like to say the prayer of St. Francis, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Where there is sadness, joy, O divine Master, grant that I may not seek to be consoled as to console, but to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Thank you, Lou. All right, Dan, first question. Oh, we got a tip. Thank you, Tiffany. Tiffany, you must be new here. I don't recognize you. Thank you. Lewis, I got your book and I can't put it down. It's like a balm to know that my dreadful experiences with the SSPX in Florida aren't singular. Any comment you want to make, Lou?
Misery loves company. No, just kidding. I'm just joking, Tiffany. You know, it's good to know that. Listen, I will say this to you: is that God loves you, and that I totally understand that there are difficulties, and I think that it's important that we understand that a lot of these people that hurt us sometimes, I don't think they all mean to hurt us or whatever. It's just we're slam dancing in the darkness through life, and I think people, bad dancers, bad dance partners step on our toes. And I think a lot of times that some of the people in the SSPX are very bad dancers. You just want to find other dance partners.
Yeah. Okay, Dan. Hi, Leslie. She's a longtime viewer. Thank you for covering this. It is so hard to live a few miles from one of their locations. Thankfully, we have a diocese parish a mile away where many refugees have come. Oh, that's good, Leslie, for your area. Very nice. Love of Jesus and Mary. Hi, thank you. Feels like a big bubble burst after the excommunication was declared. A lot of people felt that way, Lou, that in my one of my shows talking about this, a lot of Catholics said that they felt this big relief that the excommunication happened. Now, I know there's some controversy around this. I have always contended, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, because I've often considered myself a shabby Catholic, but it's to me, they point the finger at Pope Leo, that Pope Leo did this. My contention is they did it to themselves.
Yeah, and first of all, let me say this: we're all sinners, right? I do not want anybody to think that in writing this book that I was writing it because I am some sort of holy roller, because I'm not. I am a sinner just like anybody else, and I pray for God's mercy, and I pray for all of us. But I have great confidence in God's mercy. I have great confidence in God's mercy, and we keep struggling. But to your point, I think that there was a lot of confusion about the SSPX because John Paul II and Pope Benedict and Pope Francis really did a lot to try to heal the schism. But being inside of it from 1988 for a long time, and then going through the things that I went through up till recently, there was no doubt in my mind that they were in schism, right? Because it's an idea, it's like there's a certain degree of cognitive dissonance that almost all of them have, right, about what their position is. Like they'd say things about the church. Man, there was this one priest that I saw online a couple of years ago who said, "I would rather die than say the Novus Ordo Mass."
Oh, wow.
I would rather die than to say a Novus Ordo Mass. And what it is that society is, or what the new bishop said, everything the modern church touches, it destroys. What he's basically saying is that the church is defective, that Peter and all the bishops in union with him are promoting spiritual death.
Mm-hmm.
That's contrary to what our Lord promised Peter. It's contrary to the dogma of indefectibility of the church. And you can't square that circle by saying these people are in communion with us. No, they're not. Right.
Well, and it's like they say they recognize Pope Leo is the Pope, but then they disobey him.
Right.
And then they justify the disobedience saying it's not them, it's him. And it's like, no, there's a major disconnect there.
It's a delusion, and there's a delusion there. There's just this cognitive dissonance, right? It's like you're just delusional, which is ironic because the sedevacantists are laughing at them, saying, "You guys are really sedevacantists. You just aren't being honest about it with yourselves and everybody else." Because our position is at least logical in the sense of, we don't obey that guy because he's not the Pope. There is no Pope, right?
Right.
That actually makes sense to some degree, more sense than saying that, we recognize the Pope. We just, it's funny because I said this actually on the Larry Chapp show that Bishop Williamson would always say like, the Holy Father is like he's like a mentally ill father. You love him and respect him, but you don't do what he tells you to do. Right. So it's like, well, I think that John Paul II and Pope Benedict and Pope Francis all have their faculties about them. So I don't think you can say that they were incapacitated, for 55 years or whatever it is. It's just this crazy, thing that you're like, okay, it's just.
Lou, I have to tell you, you sounded like Marlon Brando there in Godfather.
I got doing things here.
All right. Tiffany says, just avoid the SSPX schools. They claim that they are offering a classical education, but it's not. Most teachers aren't even teachers. Indoctrination, not education. What are your thoughts about that, Lou?
Yeah, and that's kind of a problem in general. I think, that they don't have the resources, so they're trying to make. When we were in St. Mary's, we had these young men that were house fathers. We had these people or teachers that didn't have degrees. They were trying to do the best that they could, but the real issue is the indoctrination, and I've said this in other podcasts, that we had a teacher Brother Jeremy, who had taken over halfway through our 8th grade year because Father Hunter, who was our religion teacher, fell ill. And Brother Jeremy would talk to us about, the Pope and the primacy of the Pope, and that, where Peter is, there's the church, right? And he really drilled that in before Archbishop Lefebvre did the consecrations in 1988. And once he started saying things that were contrary to that, he was just disappeared, right? All of a sudden one day he wasn't teaching class, he wasn't living on campus anymore, just gone. Because one of the parents had complained that he was speaking out against the society's threats to consecrate without a papal mandate. That's indoctrination.
Ruh-roh. Rapunzel. Hi, Rapunzel. Oh, dear, the SS of St. John. Oh, I remember them. We were duped by them at my former parish. They came and talked about their town, and I gave them $20.
I'm sorry, Rapunzel. I don't think I was the one that came to talk, but yeah, there was. My second book will be coming out. We'll be talking a lot about that, but that's down the road. Like I said, it's one book. There's 1,200 pages would have been too much.
So when is that book coming out, Lou? I'm going to press you.
Yeah, Traddyland's been out for a month. I just and I have this book, like I said, and it's already written. It's just a matter of, it was a matter of saying I even actually, talked about doing 3 books, like a trilogy, but I kind of boiled it down to 2. So I don't know. I haven't next year maybe. We'll see how this. I mean, I have big plans. I mean, I believe in Traddyland. I'm really hustling to get it because I think it's very important for the church. I think that what's going on, one of your reviewers had said something about they felt like there was a change. I hope that's true. I hope that people realize, like, okay, they are not the solution, but there are a lot of people that are SSPX adjacent that are very sympathetic. Mm-hmm. And these next 6 months or a couple of years, I think, are very critical to help, or for us to lower that temperature, right? And to kind of talk about these problems a little more and to show, I mean, for me, and I think for people like me, and I say this to all of your listeners that have suffered to some degree or another, that our stories have to come out because we have to show what really went on with the Society of Pius X. And it wasn't all Gregorian chant and incense and piety, right? There was a lot, and there still is a lot more going on that needs to be brought to the forefront. And I will say this too, and I say this for my friends that are still in there. There are beautiful people in the SSPX, devout, lovely people, priests, right? And I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but there's a lot of bathwater.
The water's dirty. Okay, Kayla, may God bless you both. Thank you, Kayla. Kayla is a longtime viewer too. Tiffany, Christine, oh, you're new. I thought you were because I haven't seen you. I didn't often chat, but when you started covering the SSPX, I couldn't stay quiet. I love your channel. Thank you so much, Tiffany. That's nice to hear because there are lots of the people that don't. They don't like what I have to say. The SSPX is arrogant, plain and simple.
Yeah, that's a big point. Is there's a certain, there's a certain element, I think, that's the danger, the spiritual danger. And I have gone through this myself, where it's like you start to learn things and you get puffed up. Like, oh, I know, I have all the answers and I have it all figured out. And I think the devil really can, get you that way, and that is a reality. And I think that Pharisees were the ones that Jesus was the most critical of, right? Mm-hmm. And they followed all the rules. Mm-hmm. Right? They followed all the rules, except the ones that mattered most. Charity.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Dan, are there any more that we need to go through? Kayla, the excommunication should be a wake-up call to those who attend the SSPX. Also, everything that the Pope did is out of the goodness of his heart. The one thing that touched me about the Pope, about Pope Leo, I thought he wrote a beautiful letter the day before July 1st, almost pleading with the SSPX to please don't do this, Mm-hmm. And Of course, their pushback was he wouldn't meet with them. Instead, they had to deal with Cardinal Fernandez. What's your opinion about that?
Popes have been meeting with them for 38 years, and it's like, what do you want? Well, we're waiting for the right pope. I think that's what it's not. Yep, next pope. This pope isn't telling us what we want to hear. Next pope, and that's not how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Lou. Gosh, thanks for the generosity of your time tonight. I really appreciate it. Especially it's 9. We started at 9 p.m. I do that because of the West Coast audience, that it's 6 o'clock their time. So trying to navigate these time zones doesn't always work out.
No, I get it. I think you have a great show, a great program. I'm really impressed.
Thank you. Any last words before we sign off? Anything I haven't touched on?
Traddyland,
Yes.
Amazon.com. I will say this. I think that people will find that is, you can look at the reviews. I mean, it's getting.
Show your book. Turn it to the side. Look, everybody. Look how thick it is.
Yeah. But it's an easy breezy read. You'll love it.
You can read it over the weekend.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to get the audiobook out soon. So those that people like to drive around and listen to audiobooks, you'll have that.
Are you going to narrate it?
Yes.
Oh, good.
I'll tell all my friends, my SSPX friends, they all know that I could. I was actually a rascal in school. I could imitate. In one part of the book, it's kind of a funny part of the book. I do this imitation. I play this prank, but I could imitate the priests of the Society of St. Pius X, a lot of them very well. And I used to play pranks. We had this priest, that was this French priest, Father Lafitte, that was there. And he would do retreats for the boys' school and then the girls' school. And one time I called up to the girls' dorm and I said, hello, it's Father Lafitte. I want the girls to come down to the chapel for rosary. Right. So all the girls are rushing down, all the boys from the window waving at them. There was so I'm sure some of my friends are like, dude, if you're going to do an audiobook, I hope you do the voices. I'm like, I just might.
You should do it. I'm one of those nerds, Lou, that I buy the book and I buy the audiobook and I listen to the audiobook while I'm reading the book.
Oh, wow. That's thorough. You were an A+ student, I bet.
No, I wasn't. But why I do that is this. I don't know why, but it sticks in my brain. I comprehend it so much deeper when I do that. And another thing I do is after I read it once, I go back and study the book.
Well, actually, we talk about that in education is the 3 methods is like there's the visual, right? There's the auditory, and then there's the tactile. Mm-hmm. So seeing it, hearing it, writing it really helps to impress it upon the mind. And some people are more, it sticks better in different ways. So we talked about that in our methodology.
Well, there is scientific evidence that shows, and here I go back to the mindset thing because I read a lot of neuroscience about the brain, but there is a whole mind body connection that they're telling college students, do not type on your laptop to take notes. When you handwrite the notes out, you retain the information so much better. And there's actual scientific proof to show that is true. That's a true neuroscience tip, everyone.
Facts.
So get his book. Then when the audiobook comes out, buy the audio book and then go back and read and listen together. And I'm telling you, it's like stereo. So, all right, Lou, thank you so much. And you all know how we end every time. Eternal life is forever. Got a plan? I mean, our only plan is what, Lou?
Get to heaven.
Yep. And the only way we get there is through Jesus. So it's all about Jesus, everyone.
Amen.
All right. I'll see you on Monday night, and God bless you all. Thank you for being with us.